Today we're diving into a story that starts with a truly awful killing in one city, but then it just spirals into this major international issue. So let's break down exactly how that happened. It all really kicks off with just these three words: a horrendous act. I mean, that's a seriously powerful way to describe something, and it immediately tells you this isn't just any crime. So what on earth happened that got this level of attention? And here's the core of it, where it goes from local to international. India's government steps in and officially expresses strong concern for the safety of minorities in neighboring Bangladesh. Now, this wasn't just some vague statement. It was a direct reaction to the killing of a young Hindu man, which, as you can imagine, raised the stakes immediately. All right, so let's really unpack that official reaction first. I mean, how does a local crime suddenly become a topic of conversation between two countries? This little chart right here just lays out the whole dynamic perfectly, doesn't it? You've got India on one side, not just condemning a crime, but framing it as a potential threat to entire minority communities. And then, on the other side, you have Bangladesh, where the incident happened, now suddenly under this intense microscope from its very powerful neighbor. But look, to really get why the diplomats got involved, we have to go back to the very heart of the story. We need to talk about the victim and the horrible violence that actually happened on the ground in Mymensingh. To make sense of any of this, we have to start with the person at the absolute center of this tragedy. So, who was he? He was 25 years old. You know, it's just a number on a screen, but that number represents a real person, a young life cut short. And that fact alone gives this whole story a deeply human and tragic weight. His name was Dipu Chandra Das. This all went down on a Thursday in Mymensingh city. These are the simple, awful facts that ended up triggering this huge international incident. Now, the reports don't just say he was killed. They use a very specific and very loaded word: lynched. And as you can see from the definition here, that implies a mob killing, completely outside the law, usually for some kind of alleged crime. It's a term that carries a heavy, heavy history of vigilante and communal violence. The details that have come out are just stomach-churning. It was this brutal three-part sequence. First, the reports say Dipu Chandra Das was lynched by a mob. Then his body was allegedly hanged from a tree. And as if that wasn't enough, it was then set on fire. It's this escalation of pure brutality that really explains the intensity of the reaction we saw. But things like this rarely happen in a vacuum. To understand why this kind of mob violence might have erupted, you have to realize the city was, well, it was already a powder keg waiting to explode. So this killing happened while the city was already filled with unrest. There were massive protests going on because of the separate death of a student leader. The big question, the one that isn't totally clear, is how the anger from those protests might have spilled over and fueled the mob violence against Dipu Chandra Das. And this is the key takeaway when we talk about context. This lynching wasn't just some random, isolated act. It was an eruption of violence that happened inside this existing storm of public anger. It just goes to show how a really volatile atmosphere can become a breeding ground for something like vigilante justice. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. What are the broader implications here? Why does this one death in this one city matter so much far beyond its own borders? This quote from the Indian government really says it all. This situation is far from over. Keep a close watch is what diplomats say when they mean, we are scrutinizing your every move. It's a clear signal that this event is now a serious data point in the relationship between these two countries. So, when you boil it all down, this single tragic event leaves us with three huge consequences. First, it's triggered intense international scrutiny. Second, it's put the safety of minority communities across the region under a really harsh spotlight. And third, it's created this very real, very tangible point of diplomatic tension between two major neighbors. And that leaves us with a really challenging question to chew on. When a local tragedy like this explodes into an international firestorm, who's actually responsible for finding a solution? Who puts out the fire? Honestly, it's a question with no easy answers.